The rain fell in sheets as I stood before my father's casket, droplets sliding down the polished wood like tears the old man himself would never shed. 6 years had passed since I had seen my brother Jackson. 6 years since he had taken Amanda from me. I still remembered the velvet box in my pocket that day, the ring I would never get to place on her finger. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could reach. Now, as I stood grieving alone, I saw them enter the funeral home together, her hand in his. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had family betray you, because this story shows that karma always comes back around. I am Amado Reeves, 35 years old and a successful architect based in Boston. At least that was my life 6 years ago. Growing up, Jackson and I were actually close, despite our different personalities. I was always the serious, driven one, while he was carefree and charming. Only 3 years younger than me, we shared a bedroom until I turned 13 and convinced our father to let me convert the attic into my own space. Our father, Frank Reeves, was a businessman through and through. He built his real estate company from nothing, working 16-hour days and expecting the same dedication from his sons. Everything was a competition to him, from grades to sports to who could finish dinner first. Even our birthday gifts were unequal based on who he thought had performed better that year. The phrase I heard most growing up was, "Second place is just the first loser." Everything changed when our mother died of cancer when I was 17, and Jackson was 14. Dad retreated even further into work, leaving us to essentially raise ourselves. I stepped up cooking meals and helping Jackson with homework, while simultaneously maintaining my grades to get into a good architecture program. The experience bonded us in grief, but also planted seeds of resentment I would only recognize years later. I met Amanda during my junior year of college. She was studying English literature with dreams of becoming an editor. We locked eyes across a crowded campus coffee shop, and after 30 minutes of pretending to read while stealing glances, I finally worked up the nerve to speak to her. 2 years of dating followed, filled with inside jokes, weekend getaways, and plans for a future together. She fit seamlessly into my life, charming my friends, and even managing to make my father smile on the rare occasions he joined us for dinner. After graduation, we both found jobs in Boston. I joined an up-and-coming architectural firm, while she landed an assistant position at a publishing house. We moved into a small apartment together, spending evenings planning our future on a second-hand couch. I started saving for a ring 6 months, in putting aside a portion of every paycheck until I could afford the perfect diamond. 2 years into our relationship, I planned the perfect proposal at Cape Cod, where we had spent our first weekend away together. I booked the same beachfront cottage, arranged for her favorite flowers to be delivered, and secured reservations at the seafood restaurant where we had first said, "I love you." I had it all mapped out right down to the sunset timing for when I would drop to one knee. The week before, Jackson asked to borrow my car to drive to a job interview. His own vehicle was in the shop, and despite our competitive upbringing, I never hesitated to help him when he truly needed it. I handed him the keys, completely unaware that he was using my own car to secretly meet my girlfriend. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. Amanda had grown distant, often working late or meeting friends. I had never heard her mentioned before. When we were together, she checked her phone constantly, always angling the screen away from me. I attributed it to stress at work, maybe even secretly planning something for our anniversary. I was blind to the truth staring me in the face. Our last happy memory together was a simple Tuesday night dinner. We cooked together, dancing around our small kitchen to 80s music, laughing when I nearly burned the garlic bread. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. She kissed me deeply before bed, and I remember thinking how lucky I was, how excited I was to soon call her my fiancée. I had no idea it was the last time I would hold her as mine. 2 days before our planned getaway, I came home early from work, hoping to finish packing and perhaps surprise Amanda with lunch. The surprise was all mine when I opened our apartment door. Her familiar laughter floated from our bedroom, followed by a deeper chuckle I instantly recognized. My stomach dropped as I moved silently down the hallway, each step bringing me closer to a truth I already knew but could not accept. The door was partially open, Through the crack I saw them. Amanda, her blonde hair spilling across our pillows, and Jackson shirtless and leaning over her. They were not in the act itself, but the intimacy was unmistakable. Their foreheads touching as they shared whispered words meant only for each other. My brother was tracing patterns on her bare shoulder, his fingers following the same path mine had traveled countless times before. I pushed the door open fully, the hinges announcing my presence with a betraying creak. Their heads snapped toward me in perfect synchronization, two pairs of wide eyes, reflecting shock, but not nearly enough shame. How long the question escaped through my clenched teeth. Amanda pulled the sheet higher as if modesty mattered now. Amado, we need to talk. This is not what it looks like. 2 months, Jackson answered, making no move to cover himself or leave the bed. It just happened. We did not mean to hurt you. It just happened. For 2 months, while I was saving for a ring, I pulled the velvet box from my pocket and threw it against the wall. The lid popped open upon impact, the diamond catching light as it spilled onto the hardwood floor. Amanda gasped, tears filling her eyes. You were going to propose this weekend. Cape Cod. All planned out. Each phrase felt like acid on my tongue. Jackson finally stood pulling on his jeans with casual ease that made my blood boil. She was never right for you anyway, bro. You two want different things. She told me how you never listened to her, how you are always working. So you decided to help her out. My own brother. The person who grew up sharing my room, who I taught to ride a bike, who I helped through high school after Mom died. He shrugged an infuriating gesture that dismissed 20 years of brotherhood. Sometimes people just connect on a different level. Competition is natural, right? That is what Dad always says. I turned to Amanda. I need you gone by tonight, both of you. Amado, please, she began, but I was already backing out of the room. Just take what is yours and leave the key. I managed to make it to my car before the tears came hot and angry, blurring the road as I drove aimlessly for hours. Within a week, Amanda had moved all her things out while I was at work, leaving only a handwritten note saying she was sorry, but she could not help how she felt. By the end of the month, I heard through mutual friends that she had moved in with Jackson. My father, when I told him what happened, merely shrugged and said, "That is life, son. The strong take what they want." The next 6 months passed in a haze of work and isolation. I threw myself into projects, staying at the office until midnight most nights. Friends tried to check on me, but I pushed everyone away. The few times I ran into mutual acquaintances, they awkwardly mentioned seeing Jackson and Amanda together at restaurants or parties, not realizing each word was a fresh cut on a wound that refused to heal. 3 months after the betrayal, I attempted to reconcile with Jackson. Not for him, but for my own peace of mind. I called and suggested meeting for coffee. He arrived 45 minutes late, reeking of Amanda's perfume, and spent the entire time justifying their relationship. Sometimes the best man does not win, he said with a smug smile that made me want to break something, preferably his nose. I left before the check came, knowing then that our brotherhood was beyond repair. My rock-bottom moment came on a rainy night, much like the day of the funeral. I sat alone in a downtown bar, starting my 4th whiskey, when I overheard a group of young professionals talking about an exciting new construction project. One mentioned my architectural firm, then another said, "I heard the lead architect is having a total breakdown," something about his brother stealing his girlfriend. The humiliation of being gossip fodder, combined with the realization that I was becoming exactly the bitter, broken man they described, hit me like cold water. I paid my tab, walked home in the pouring rain, and made a decision I would not let my brother and Amanda define the rest of my life. The next day I applied for a position at a prestigious firm in Seattle. 2 weeks later, I accepted their offer, sold most of my possessions, and left Boston without saying goodbye to anyone. Seattle welcomed me with its moody skies and coffee-scented air. The first months were hard, living in a Spartan apartment, with minimal furniture, working long hours to prove myself at the new firm. But there was something freeing about being somewhere. No one knew my story, where I could rebuild without the weight of pitying glances. 6 months into my new life, an opportunity landed on my desk that would change everything. The firm needed someone to lead the design for a major downtown public library project. Despite being relatively new, I volunteered presenting concepts that blended functionality with artistic elements, inspired by the city's relationship with water and mountains. To my surprise, the partners gave me the project my first major lead position. The library became my obsession, my redemption, my statement to the world and myself that I was more than my heartbreak. During a client meeting to discuss interior design elements, I met Jessica Winters, a publishing executive representing a literary foundation that was partially funding the project. Tall, with dark curly hair and intelligent brown eyes, she challenged my ideas in ways that made them better rather than tearing them down. "Your main reading room lacks intimacy," she said, pointing to my blueprints. "Libraries need to balance the grandeur of knowledge with the personal connection to stories." Instead of feeling defensive, I found myself energized by her perspective. We stayed 2 hours after the meeting ended, reworking the design together over coffee that turned into dinner. Our conversation flowed from architecture to books to our backgrounds. Unlike the immediate chemistry with Amanda, my connection with Jessica built slowly, thoughtfully, each interaction, adding another layer of respect and interest. Jessica had moved to Seattle from the East Coast 5 years earlier, escaping what she called a suffocating small-town mentality. She grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, not far from where Jackson and I were raised in Massachusetts. She had built her career from an editorial assistant to executive director of a major publishing house's West Coast division, all before turning 33. We dated for 4 months before she first stayed the night, both of us cautious about rushing emotional intimacy. When I finally told her about Jackson and Amanda, we were sitting on my apartment balcony watching a summer lightning storm over Puget Sound. I expected pity in her eyes, but found understanding instead. "People who betray others like that are running from something in themselves," she said, her fingers laced through mine. "Your brother did not steal her. She was not a possession to be taken. They both made choices that revealed who they truly are." Her wisdom helped me finally release the last grip anger had on my heart. Our relationship deepened, built on honest communication and genuine support of each other's ambitions. When the library opened to critical acclaim, Jessica stood beside me at the ribbon, cutting her pride in my work, reflecting back everything I had begun to feel about myself again. 2 years after meeting, we married in a small ceremony on a cliffside property we had purchased together. I did not invite Jackson or my father, sending only a simple announcement after the fact. Jessica wore blue instead of white. We wrote our own vows, and our honeymoon was a working trip to Japan, where we both found inspiration in the architecture and literature of Kyoto. My firm grew, eventually becoming Reeves Architectural Design with offices in 3 cities. National magazines featured my work, and universities invited me to lecture on sustainable urban design. Jessica's publishing career similarly flourished, her eye for undiscovered authors, turning several debut novels into bestsellers. We built our dream home, overlooking Lake Washington, a modernist structure of glass and reclaimed timber that reflected both our tastes. In quiet evenings, sitting in our reading nook watching the water, we discussed starting a family, both agreeing we wanted to parent differently than either of us had experienced. One rainy morning, a call came that shattered the peaceful life we had built. My father's housekeeper, the only person who still regularly communicated with me from my past, informed me that Frank Reeves had been diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. He had perhaps 3 months to live, and had asked in his gruff way if I might consider visiting. 5 years had passed since I left Boston. 5 years of healing growth and building a new life with Jessica. The thought of returning, of facing Jackson, and possibly Amanda, made my stomach clench with an anxiety I thought I had overcome. "You do not have to go," Jessica said that night. "Your father made his choice when he dismissed your pain." "If I do not go, I will always wonder if I should have," I replied. "And I am not the same man who left. I am stronger now." Jessica took my hands in hers. "Then we will go together. Whatever happens, we face it as a team." 2 weeks later, the call came that my father had passed sooner than expected. The funeral was scheduled for that weekend. Despite everything, I booked first-class tickets for Jessica and myself, reserved a limousine from the airport, and prepared to return to the city I had once fled. The cemetery was on a hillside overlooking the Boston skyline, gray clouds providing a fittingly somber backdrop. Jessica and I arrived in our black limousine, its sleek presence drawing glances from relatives I barely recognized. I stepped out first in my tailored suit, a far cry from the department store clearance rack clothes I wore when I left. Jessica needed to take an important call from an author, promising to join me momentarily. I stood alone before my father's casket, memories washing over me like the light rain. For all his flaws, Frank Reeves had taught me persistence, even if his version had been warped by ruthless competition. In my own way, I had taken that lesson and transformed it into something healthier, more sustainable. Cousins, business associates, and old neighbors offered condolences, several double-taking, when they recognized me, their expressions shifting from sympathy to surprise at my transformation. I was no longer the heartbroken young man who fled, but a successful professional with an air of quiet confidence. The murmurs around me suddenly hushed, and I did not need to turn to know why. Jackson had arrived. I took a deep breath and slowly faced the entrance to the cemetery where my brother stood, with Amanda beside him, her hand clasped in his. 6 years had not been kind to either of them. Jackson's hairline had receded dramatically, and his once athletic frame had softened into the beginning of a middle-aged paunch. The designer clothes he had always favored looked a size too small, as if he were trying to squeeze into a younger version of himself. Amanda's once radiant smile now seemed fixed, and brittle, her eyes darting nervously around the gathering. They made their way toward me, Jackson's stride attempting confidence, but achieving only arrogance. When they reached me, he looked me over clearly, noting the quality of my attire, the healthy glow. Jessica insisted came from actual happiness, rather than expensive facials. "Big brother," he said, his voice carrying to ensure others would hear. "Long time no see. Sorry it takes a funeral to bring the family together." He gestured to the mourners, the casket, the general scene, as if he were the rightful host, and I the reluctant guest. "Some guys just finish first, I guess." I smiled, not the angry grimace he clearly expected, but a genuine smile born of knowing exactly who I was. "You still working that office job at Henderson Properties, assistant to the regional manager, right?" His jaw tightened. I had hit the mark. While I had built a nationally recognized firm, Jackson was still in the same entry-level corporate position he had landed after half-finishing his business degree. "I am on track for promotion," he said defensively. "Not everyone needs to show off with fancy clothes and cars. Funny, I never thought of success as showing off, just the natural result of hard work and integrity." I turned slightly to include Amanda in the conversation. "How have you been?" She seemed startled to be acknowledged directly. "Fine," she said quietly. "We are doing fine. I hear you have done well for yourself." Jackson cut in. "Though I bet those West Coast types are easier to impress than real East Coast clients." I was about to respond when the sound of car door closing turned all our heads. Jessica stepped out of the limousine radiant in a simple black dress, her professional confidence evident in every step. As she approached, I saw Jackson's eyes widen in appreciation, then narrow in calculation, already thinking of ways to undermine my happiness. "Sorry for the delay, darling." The Tokyo manuscript situation needed immediate attention. Jessica reached my side, slipping her hand into mine with the easy familiarity of deep partnership. "Jackson, Amanda, this is my wife, Jessica Reeves. She is the executive publishing director for Northlight Literary." Jessica extended her hand to Amanda first, who took it limply. Then to Jackson, whose expression had shifted from calculation to confusion, then to dawning recognition. Jessica Winters. From Danbury High Class of 2006, his voice had lost its smugness, replaced by something approaching panic. Jessica tilted her head, studying him. "Yes, Jackson Reeves. I do remember you. You were suspended senior year for cheating on finals, right? And something about lying about a sick grandmother to avoid turning in a term paper." Jackson's face reddened. "That was all a misunderstanding." "Interesting coincidence," I said. genuinely surprised. "You never mentioned knowing my brother." "I did not make the connection until just now," Jessica replied. Danbury High had over 2,000 students, and Jackson was 2 years behind me. We ran in very different circles. She turned to Amanda. "I do not believe we ever crossed paths, though." Amanda, looking increasingly uncomfortable, shook her head. "I grew up in Boston." The funeral director approached, indicating it was time to begin the service. As we moved toward the seating area, I noticed Jackson had nearly dropped Amanda's hand, his previous swagger deflated by the realization that my wife knew exactly who he was beneath the expensive watch and practiced smile. The service itself was brief, as my father had requested. Various business associates praised his entrepreneurial spirit and determination qualities that had made him successful in real estate, but less so in family relationships. Jackson gave a short speech full of platitudes about fatherly wisdom, while I chose not to speak, my presence itself a final respect to the complicated man who had raised us. Afterwards, the family attorney approached us both. "Your father's will specifies that the family home be left to both of you jointly," he explained. "All other assets have been liquidated and divided according to his instructions, with details to follow at the formal reading tomorrow." Jackson looked at me triumphantly. "Guess Dad believed in equality after all. Or he wanted to force us to work together one last time," I replied, knowing my father's manipulative tendencies. "We should discuss this privately." As the guests began departing for the reception, Amanda excused herself to use the restroom in the funeral home. Surprisingly, she sought me out afterward, finding me alone by a large oak tree. "I need to say something," she began, her voice low. "I am sorry, Amado. What we did was wrong. I should have ended things cleanly instead of going behind your back." I studied her face, searching for the feelings that had once consumed me. To my surprise, I felt nothing but a distant pity. "Are you happy, Amanda?" Her hesitation told me everything. "Jackson is not who I thought he was," she finally admitted. "He changed once we moved in together. Or maybe he was always that way and I just did not see it." "We all make choices," I said simply. "Some lead us where we need to go, even when the path seems wrong at first." Tears filled her eyes. "You seem happy. Really happy." "I am. Jessica is not just my wife. She is my partner in every sense. I should go. Jackson will be looking for me." She turned to leave, then paused. "I truly am sorry. I know. And strangely enough, I am grateful. If you had not chosen him, I might never have found the courage to leave Boston to rebuild to meet Jessica." I offered a small smile. "We are all exactly where we are supposed to be." Jessica found me moments later, her presence immediately centering me amidst the emotional turbulence of the day. "You okay better than okay," I assured her. "Let us find Jackson and settle this house situation. I want to get back to our life." We found my brother at the reception, mechanically accepting condolences while keeping an anxious eye on Amanda, who stood apart from him now, her body language closed and distant. When he saw us approach, he straightened, defensiveness radiating from him. "Come to gloat some more about your fancy West Coast life, no Jackson. I came to offer you a deal on the house. I will sell you my half at fair market value with reasonable payment terms. You always loved that house more than I did." His suspicion was palpable. "Why would you do that?" "Because holding on to resentment only poisoned me, not you. Because I have built something better than anything competition could provide. Because I choose to break the cycle our father created." For a moment, the mask of bravado dropped, and I saw the younger brother I had once protected. "I cannot afford market value, not even close. Then we work something out, but this ends today. The rivalry, the bitterness, all of it. We will never be close, but we do not have to be enemies." Later, as Jessica and I departed for the airport, declining to stay for the full reading of the will, I felt a weight lifting that I had not realized I still carried. The Seattle rain would wash away the last residue of Boston pain. 2 weeks after returning home, Jessica and I sat on our deck watching the sunset over the lake. She took my hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I was going to wait until things settled, but I cannot keep it in any longer. We are having a baby." Joy surged through me, pure and uncomplicated. "When did you find out?" "The morning of the funeral. I wanted that day to hold at least one beautiful memory for you." As we sat entwined in the fading light, I reflected on the winding path that had led me here. My brother had taken someone I thought was the love of my life, only for me to discover what true partnership actually meant. My father had taught competition above all, yet his death had ultimately freed us from its toxic hold. True success was not about finishing first. It was about building a life with integrity, love, and genuine connection. I placed my hand more firmly on Jessica's stomach, feeling the future pulse beneath my fingers, and knew with absolute certainty that I had won something far more valuable than any competition could offer. Have you ever had a betrayal that ultimately led you to something better? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of karma and redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family betrayal and finding true happiness. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to finding what you truly need. Share this with someone who might need to hear that the best revenge is not just living well, but living authentically.